Franklin Merrel Wolff, Concerning Duty. September 17. To the merely egoistic man, duty appears as in some sense an external constraint. It is a mode of conduct as defined by the civil law, by the religious authority, by the social body of which he is a member, or by his own rational judgment. Impulses arising from the different aspects of the human nature are often at variance with the pronouncements of such duty. The result is a battle in the man between something that he calls lower and something else which he feels is higher. Duty comes as an imposed discipline and implies more or less hardship, although in general the fruit of faithfully performed duty is a sense of having done well. As a rule, in the end, this feeling more than offsets the hardship. But it is unquestionably true that the urge to freedom, naturally great in some men, leads to restiveness under the sway of duty. It is also true that among the variously imposed duties, there is very often an incompatibility, so that if the individual acts in faithful accordance with a given duty, he at the same time violates the requirements of another. This may happen even within the field of duties which the individual himself freely recognizes as proper. So it is impossible to say of a life confined strictly within the path of duty that is free from conflict. In the case of an awakened man, duty undergoes a radical transformation. Duty ceases to be, or more properly, progressively ceases to have the character of something externally imposed, even in the sense in which we may say that a man's own theoretical judgment of right and wrong is external. On this higher level, duty becomes a spontaneous impulse that flows out of the illumined consciousness, so that here the conflict between duty and impulse vanishes. From the standpoint of illumination, the desired thing to do is the right thing to do. As a consequence, in one sense, the illumined man, while he is acting or judging in the current of illumination, is beyond duty. But this is true only so long as we give to duty the connotation of something externally imposed. However, in some usages, the meaning of duty has been extended to cover a wider connotation than this. Duty has been employed as a translation of the Sanskrit term dharma. Now, dharma carries a meaning for which there is no adequate English equivalent, though duty carries a portion of that meaning. However, the inadequacy of this translation is made clear in the following illustration. It is perfectly proper to say it is the dharma of fire, to burn. But if we substitute duty for dharma and say it is the duty of the fire to burn, the effect is quite false with respect to the primary meaning we attach to the word duty. In a similar sense, it is perfectly true that it is the dharma of the God-conscious man to act in accordance with the divine impulse that springs up in him. Clearly, this dharma is not an external constraint as it is at one with an interior and divine impulse. Such a man is happy when acting in accordance with dharma and not otherwise. If now we agree to give to duty just precisely the meaning attached to dharma, then it remains true. The illumined man does not transcend duty, but in this case, duty would cease to have the connotation of an external constraint. The problem in connection with the word duty is psychological and emotional rather than rational. Intellectually, we can say, let duty have the connotation of dharma, and then proceed to use it in the changed sense. I have done this myself for some time and find no hardship in the notion of duty. The only difficulty being the definition of just what the duty is in a given complex situation where different canons of action come into conflict. When a clear definition emerged, I always felt happy, but much of the time I found it difficult to attain the clarity. However, I find that many individuals are unable to overcome a certain negative emotional complex centering around the word duty. So I suggest that we take over into our language the term dharma, as we have already assimilated many Latin and Greek words, and use it to cover the meaning for which duty is admittedly inadequate. For an electron to a god, there is no creature beyond dharma. But there is a level where duty is transcended when understood in the usual sense. It is a mistake to think that the dharma of even the God-conscious man is without problems. As God-conscious, his impulse is his dharma, and thus there is no emotional conflict. But the question, what does the dharma mean in practical action, is quite another matter. Absolute solutions of relative problems outside of mathematics do not exist. The higher consciousness is certain on its own level, It does not affect an enormous clarification of insight on the subject-object level, and it always manifests as an intent to affect the highest good of all. But in all dealings with human beings, unknown variables are involved, even from the perspective of high adepts. As a consequence, illumination by no means implies infallible action in the subject-object field. So there always remains the practical problem, which we may state in the form of the question, what course in action best manifests the inwardly recognized Dharma? Naturally, for the solution of this problem, the illumined man who has, in addition to his illumination, a broad rational understanding of the science of ethics is also best equipped for making lofty intent to manifest as wise action. Another important point which should be remembered is that the fact that rarely, if ever, is the personality of the God conscious man enveloped in the full light of the higher consciousness at all times. Generally, the period of the development is brief, sometimes of only momentary duration, and in many cases it happens but once in a lifetime. Most of the time, even in the cases of men who have known in a higher order of illumination, the consciousness sinks more or less into the subject-object field with a corresponding obscuration of the insight. The lesser impulses, which have their ground in the subject-object man, are not completely transformed in one moment, although the purification of them proceeds progressively. There remains, therefore, a practical need for discrimination among the complex of all impulses that may arise. He who has even no more than one moment of illumination does have a modulus for such discrimination, and that gives him a decisive advantage over other men. But nevertheless, he has not transcended the need for discrimination in practical action.